NSFW. What NSFW thing happened at a sleepover when you were younger? I was riding the bus to school with a gay friend and asked him how and when he knew he was gay, since he'd never done anything sexual that I knew of with anyone. I was curious how he was so sure. Kind of stupid these days, but this was a while ago and I was young and dumb. We were both 15, 16, something like that. This was over 20 years ago now. He told me, well, the last time I had a sleepover, after everybody went to sleep, I took out Rob's penis and kind of played with it and put in my mouth and stuff. And you liked it? I guess. Yeah. I mean, he stayed soft, but it was really fun to play with. Penises are awesome. That's faked up, man. You shouldn't do that to people. You totally raped Robbie. No. He was asleep. He doesn't know I did it, so it doesn't count. It still counts. You can't faking fuck someone who's sleeping and just say it's okay I didn't fuck him. He barely got hard. It was mostly just soft and squishy, and you know, I flipped it around. It was fun. That doesn't make it okay. You having fun doesn't stop it from being faked up. Well, it wasn't just him. I tried everybody out. I wanted to see different ones. Sam got hard. Oh my god. How many guys were there? 4, but I didn't do anything to Eric. But, you like Eric. He had a major crush on him, exactly. Dude, you raped 3 guys, but left the one you're actually attracted to alone. I didn't rape them. I just, you know, played with them and put them in your mouth. That doesn't count. This conversation continued for the entire bus ride to school. I know he didn't mean anything bad by any of it, but it's still pretty faked up. My friend replaced the batteries in a flashlight with his poop. Edit. Here is the full story. There were 3 of us. Myself, X and Y. Our other friend Z, much earlier in the week, made plans for us to come hang out. If we ever went to his house, it was an implied sleepover. So we showed up, and Z's parents let us in. They knew he went out for band practice, and just like us assumed he would be back later. So we had dinner and talked with them for about 2 hours. Zed never showed up, so we went up to his room after dinner. His parents went straight to bed. Another hour went by and it was getting late. So I called Zed. He forgot he invited us over and lied about being at home really sick. We were standing in his room. So X, Y and I decided to get back at him. It started out harmless. We just wanted him to know we had been there. So we got onto his computer and managed to get into his World of Warcraft account. We changed his main character to something like Zlakesbut's X or something. We then sent all of his good stuff to X's WoW account. We then decided to play Zed Sparks. This was back when the 360 had just come out, and he was the only friend we had with one. But Zed's power cable was missing. So Y and I started looking for the cable. Our search took us to Zed's closet where X started being annoying. Zed's closet was the size of my bedroom and the lights did not work. So Y used his phone to light our way. I found the soon to be notorious flashlight on a shelf and tried to use it. The batteries were dead and X, the soon to be poopist, was being really obnoxious, trying to help us look by throwing random things at us over his shoulder. I threw the flashlight at him. He then looked at me and said, "Dare me to cheat in this?" I replied with the fateful 2 words, "No balls." X then slammed the closet door, locking Y and me inside. Y was still looking for the cable and I figured X was just kidding. I heard the toilet lid slam. Then I heard a hefty splash, then a nug. X then came back in and closed the door, so it was pitch black once more. He said, "Yeah, I couldn't do it, you were right." I saw his outline in the dark reach out to hand me the light. So I took it and said, "See why? He's a sissy. No bay." Y turned to face us with his cell phone screen lighting up. The horror coming out of the flashlight was about 4 inches of dirt. I screamed in disgust and threw it at X caught it like some sort of ninja and threw it end over end as hard as he could back at me. I ducked and Y jumped to the floor. The poo light then splattered all over the back wall of the closet. We left like ghosts on the night, hopped into my truck and drove to Y's house in silence, where the sleepover continued and we finally began to cackle about our evil deeds. One of my favorite childhood memories Not very NSFW, but I still wouldn't post it in a SFW version of this thread. I was probably like 9. My best friend, he still is, was over, staying the night. All good. We'd played some Minecraft, like you did 10 years ago, and then we went to have dinner. He's never been a big eater, and he's always had difficulties with social gatherings, so a condition for him coming over used to be that he wouldn't have to eat with my family. I was too much of an idiotic douche-knuzzle to get the idea of waiting and eating with him. Anyhow, after the meal, I get back to my room, where he's standing in the middle, eyes on the floor. He's looking ashamed, sad, and ready for a scolding, beating, or whatever. There was an accident, he said. I instantly thought he'd broken one of my toys or something, but it was so much better. From behind his back, he took his hand to show me his sheet-stained underwear. Remember, we were 9 years old. I showered while you ate and borrowed a pair of your underwear. Strange as it may sound, I've never felt closer to a friend than I did that particular moment. I remember smiling a bit and how I told him we could go down to the laundry room later to wash them without anyone noticing. The fact that he comfortably used my shower and took my underwear without asking felt good, just because I knew how dire his social and general anxiety was. It was a confirmation to me that he trusted me deeply. TLDR, a friend cheat himself at my place. 14-15-year-old I stayed the night with my best friend. His younger sister was friends with a girl a little older than her. We were downstairs on the living room couch watching Adult Swim, and she asks if I want to give her a massage. Of course I do, so she laid down, and I started massaging. Eventually she took off her bra and got some lotion so our massaging would be less hindered. I eventually worked my way down and started feeling on her side boob. I ended up finger blasting her, and she gave me what was, I'm pretty sure, my second hand job ever. The whole time my friend is trying to watch, and I'm motioning to him to get fo. We all go upstairs and go to bed after that. Of course she tells my friend's little sister tells her older cousin, and older cousin tells my friend's mom. His mom calls me into her room one night, not in the way you're thinking. In so many words she tells me to feel free to jerk off in the bathroom if I feel the need to, that she understands that it's an awkward time sexually, but to please refrain from finger blasting her daughter's friends on the living room couch. I turned a million different shades of red. His mom handled it really gracefully and skillfully. Looking back, I'm impressed by her level-headedness about it all. My parents would never have handled it that well. When I was in 2nd grade, my really good friend had a sleepover for his birthday and invited around 10 kids from school. His parents had got him an Xbox for his birthday with Halo 2 and 4 controllers, so all of us freaked out and played it in his room all night. Well, as things usually go with 2nd graders, Halo got super intense, and when someone would ask to pause the game to go to the bathroom, we would unpause it and kill them a few times before they got back. Well, there was this one kid named Josh who was really good at the game and would beat all of us almost all the time. So at some point in the night, Josh tells us he has to go to the bathroom. We all snicker because we know that we are gonna fuck his sheet up when he leaves. But he doesn't go to the bathroom, so we keep playing. We play for a while longer, and Josh has a pained look on his face, so we tell him that he can go to the bathroom and we will all put our controllers down. He refuses again. After a couple minutes, we hear a loud fetching noise, and immediately after, she just starts falling out of Josh's pants all over the floor. We all start freaking out, and Josh, who hasn't stopped playing, takes this as a sign that he should poop even more. Hearing a commotion, my friend's dad comes in, pauses for a second to take in the picture of Josh unleashing the kraken all over his son's room, and just walks away. It was my 8th birthday party and my 2 best girlfriends were staying the night. At the time my mother worked the night shift, so my father was watching us, but he had to get up early, so he was in bed when we were playing Truth or Dare, and dared one of my friends to take off all her clothes and run to the bottom of the lengthy front steps and back. Being 8 years old, we didn't really have a concept of nudity as a sexual thing, just that it was funny. Then, when she was at the bottom of the steps and headed back up, we shut and locked the door because we were mean. and because children we didn't realize how dangerous what we were doing was. We were howling with laughter while our friend pleaded with us to let her in. She was crying that she was cold, so we grabbed some paper towels and handed them to her through the mail slot when my dad was roused to the living room and came in asking, "What in the world are you girls doing?" He opens the door and finds our friend on the stoop naked as the day she's born, trying to cover herself with paper towels, and my other friend and I were collapsing in hysterical laughter on the floor. My dad, champ that he was, just gave us a quick "no more locking your naked friend outside. It's not safe." Then went back to bed. Ha ha ha. To be fair, in retrospect, we are all 33 now and still friends, and we all laugh when we reminisce about that moment, mostly because my father's reaction was so priceless. Just complete what the fuck, no more naked children in front of the house. Please lol, the 80s were a fun time to be a kid. I was about 12 years old, and I was at my buddy's day sleepover. We had ridden our bikes to the pool that day, and on the way back I found a Born magazine on the street, so I grabbed it and tossed it in the old backpack. Thinking back on this, picking that thing up was a nasty thing to do, but I didn't know it at the time. When we got back we were all hanging out in the basement and we were going to play Warhammer 40k. If you don't know what it is, don't ask. My guidebook was in my backpack, so I pulled it out, and one of the kids asked what the other book was. I pulled it out, and we started looking at it. For the record, it was totally soft core and just breasts, probably the reason it was discarded. After a few minimums our one friend took off running. We all laughed and thought he got a boner. Pretty soon he comes back down with the kid's mom host party we were at, and she started scolding all of us. She then asked how it was, and I say I found it on the way home and didn't think it was a big deal. She pulls my upstairs yelling and is threatening to call my parents, so being my defiant self I tell her go for it. She calls my dad and puts us on speakerphone so I can hear the disappointment of my dad. She begins to tell him the issue and what happened, and my dad's response is, "Okay. Why are you calling me about this?" She goes on to say how inappropriate it was and how it's disgusting. He responds with, "We are talking about a group of 12-year-old boys. If you want me to come pick him up from the party I'm happy to do so, but I feel that is going overboard." Ended up I walked back downstairs and continued the party. TLDR. Found Born magazine on street. Group of 12-year-old boys looked at it. One boy tattled. My dad told the kid's mom she is dumb. Back around when I was in 6th grade I used to play junior football. I met one of my longtime friends doing so. He and I occasionally arranged sleepovers where we'd mainly play video games or mess around with airsoft guns. Well, basically his mom had, or thing for me it seemed, she'd always give me massages and tell me I was very handsome for someone my age. Well, one time during a sleepover my friend went out with some of his other friends to egg someone's house. I wanted no part in it, so I just stayed and played video games. His mom had just gotten out of the shower and she entered into the living room with just a towel wrapped around her. She said, "Hey, my name." I looked over and she opened the towel revealing her naked body. I had a million things going through my head at that moment. I was turned on, disgusted, and perplexed at the same time. I didn't say anything and she said, "Would you like to come with me to my room?" The emotions and confusion were overwhelming for me, and I told her no, and that I want to keep playing and wait for my friend. She left and told me not to say anything. I somehow removed the experience from my mind and never mentioned it to my friend. His mom never came on to me or mentioned it after that either. These are still coming in. May as well get this story down. So a girl I knew in high school lived out in a farmhouse with her weirdo parents. She would throw big sleepover parties pretty regularly when her parents were home, which they usually were, since they were both on disability and ran a sex toy business over the internet. The sleepers would be divided between boys and girls and made to sleep in separate rooms. This is because despite the fact that they were both in on this sex toy business, the father was this whacked out Christian identity / worldwide Church of God dude. How he managed that balance is unknown to me, besides simple insanity I guess. Anyway, one night after a great deal of drinking, weed, and a bit of mushrooms, we finally separate into sexes and hunker down for eventual sleep. There's laughing and carrying on coming from the girls' room, but the guys are pretty wasted and ready to pass out, if only to stop the room from spinning. I'm not super drunk, but my spot on a bottom bunk is pretty comfy, and I drift off to sleep pretty easily. I'm woken up maybe an hour or so later, but what I come to realize is the girl whose house it is. She's wearing a white nightgown and she's saying something I can't really make out. Eventually I make out that she's asking if I'm awake, and I mutter that I am. What's the emergency? She doesn't say anything, she just grabs my hand, puts it on the bottom of her thigh, and slides it up. I get a lot more awake and realize that she's super wet and that my fingers are right up in her. She kind of bends over and rides my fingers for a bit. I don't say a thing because I have no fucking clue what's going on. She starts telling me about how her and her friend had started having a lesbian moment and how they'd gotten pretty hot and heavy before her friend bailed. She'd gotten so close that she needed something, and so she'd snuck into the guy's room, and I was right there. We knew each other pretty well, so she figured it would be safe enough, and I'd be down for it. So she comes on my hand and a couple seconds later she got on top of me, and we had very quiet, very hot sex, while everyone else was sleeping. Or pretended to sleep, probably. We didn't talk about it in the morning or let on that anything had happened, although I later ended up dating her for a couple of years. Okay, here goes. Buckle down, this is a bit of a read. 8th grade, I'm the new kid, but it's towards the end of the school year, so I've made friends and people know who I am. I get invited to my friend's birthday party / sleepover combo, boys and girls. Girls couldn't stay overnight though. About 6 or 7 boys and 3 or 4 girls. His house is out in the country on a back road. Their front yard is basically a giant field with trees scattered throughout, and at the far end, about 1.5 acres away, is a little creek. This is important. I arrive fashionably late, and not 5 minutes later one of the girls shows her tigs to us behind the house. She's like a high B cup, so of course us boys are freaking out. Apparently the girls snuck some booze from one of their parents, and were tipsy, a little drunk maybe. Now being in 8th grade I don't actually know if they were drinking, but one girl dipped, so it's possible they were into that habit. I don't know. I never saw any of the alcohol and the boys were all sober. Anyway, time passes and we set up a tent to all hang out in about halfway between the house and the creek. So the sun starts setting, and we all go to the creek to swim and hang out. Girls still acting drunk. We see another pair of tigs as one of their tops slipped off as they were readjusting. 14-year-old rages. It's getting dark, so we all head back to the tent. One girl is stumbling from being drunk, so I help her walk back, and she said I could touch her chest for helping her. Note here, I'm tall, lanky, pale, nerdy, not a very good looking kid, so of course I'm over the moon I get to touch a female. I lightly palm her boob, no squeezing, out of respect, and feel sufficed. We get back to the tent and everyone is just talking and hanging out. It's pretty much black in the tent, no one can really see anything too well. Then it gets quiet, and we hear a noise similar to stirring mac and cheese. We look towards the middle of the tent and 2 of the girls were making out. I, being the sexual deviant I am, take a flashlight and shine it right on them. The light irritated them so they stopped, and the boys yelled at me for ruining the show. So we continue talking and hanging out. Then one of the guys starts playing music on his phone, like house UNF music. The girls each pick a boy and start grinding on them. Surprise, I don't get picked. But I'm witty /s, so I stand in the middle of the tent and say, oh hey look, I'm the pole. The girl who I felt up giggles and dances on me for like 30 seconds, then picks a new boy. The tent escapades ended and the girls went home. Later all the guys are standing outside in a circle just faking around when one of them takes a cup and says we should all zizz in this and see how much we can fill it. Recently acquiring new spank bank material, I all too happily volunteer to go first. I go behind a tree and polish my love scepter into the cup and proudly come back to the group, who have decided to be done with said zizzing activity and leave me and my shame cup of creamy Italian alone standing there. Then one guy got tigty pics from the girls, and we drew a pentagram and outlined it in lighter fluid and lighted on fire and danced around it because we're faking 14. Boys will be boys. Then one of the guys had a night terror and stood in the middle of the room pointing at the door and shaking for like 3 minutes. This is one of the most vivid memories of elementary school for me. My best friend and this other girl lived on the same street. We're all women, by the way. We often spent the night at other girls' house because her parents were hippies, so nobody hovered. Well, here's what put an end to that. You know those ones full of water and sequins that you can play with and everything swirls around inside? Long story short, we are sleeping over and other girl comes out of her bathroom with this look on her face. Want to see something? She asks. Then she lifts up her skirt and her underwear looks like an upside down tent. My best friend and I look at one another in horror. Other girl pulls her panties down and it turns out that her underwear looked like that because she has one of those ones stuck in her bag. No explanation was provided for why she decided to share this with us. So that's how I learned what a vagina was. My mom wasn't really into explaining things and that I could put stuff in it. Oh man, I remember a while back, I was probably 14 or so. I was staying over at my buddy's house and it was a typical Friday night. My friend's mom had bought us all pizza because his sister had a friend over too, so we all ate around the table while I remember his sister's friend kept giving me flirtatious looks. Anyways, the mom crashes early and me and my friend go back to his room to play Streets of Rage all night while the sister and her friend do their thing in the room next door. We could hear them giggling and just made fun of them because that's what boys do. But I couldn't stop thinking about those flirty glances. So after a few hours, my friend says he's getting ready to pass out. I'm still a bit worked up because I kept hearing the giggling next door. So when he finally fell asleep, I go into the kitchen to make a bit of noise to let the sister and her friend know I was still up and casually grabbing a slice of cold pizza. Just my luck, I hear their door open up ever so slightly and they both come out of the room wearing their very skimpy PJs. My heart gets ready to burst and they slink into the kitchen where I am and the friend says, "Hey, glad you're still awake. We need your help with something back in sister's room, so this is it." I play it as cool as I can while blood gets diverted from my legs so I can barely walk straight and I make my way into the girls' room. They shut the door behind them and I'm standing there bracing myself when the sister says, "Hey, I know you're not trained or authorized, but can you jump on this forklift and load these unmarked, potentially hazardous pallets onto that container without paperwork?" I was blown away. My legs were shaking. I was so scared of getting into trouble. They were like, "Don't worry about it. You don't need to follow standard safety protocols," when the boss isn't around, which explained why they weren't wearing steel toe boots and high-vis tops as mandated in the employee handbook. Fuck, I got out of there so quick and ran back into my friend's room and pretended to fall asleep so fast. I don't think I'll ever forget that night. Must have been about 15 or 16, sleeping over at my best friend's house in the school holidays. Usually did this for a week or so straight. One night his much younger sister had a friend from dance class stay over too, except the friend was our age and extremely hot. They were sleeping in the living room and we were in his bedroom. After the parents went to sleep, we snuck down just to talk and eat junk food. It started to escalate somehow into a tickle game where we would go under the blankets and pinch, jab, tickle another person and no one knew who was doing what. Crazy tickling for a minute, then we would stop and laugh our asses off. Then it would start again. Innocent at first, but eventually my friend and I just started to focus on the hot girl and on very specific body parts, if you catch my drift. Essentially I was just going under the covers and playing with her tigs, my friend working the lower groin region, her laughing, moaning, and loving it. My friend's sister had no idea and just started to complain no one was tickling her anymore. This repeated several times until we got spooked. The parents heard us and went back upstairs to his room. Proceeded to debrief on our incredible experiences and then jerk it like madmen. We ended up hanging out with her a couple of other times. Just social and nothing sexual. I found out she had a crush on me, but being a combination of naive and lazy did nothing about it. Losing contact. Kicked myself for many years following. When I was around 9 I went to visit my cousins during summer. Every summer I would go visit and my parents would usually leave me with them for a week while they went back home for work and they later came back. Well anyway, there were 4 of us. Me, 9, male cousin, 11, female cousin, 13, and female cousin, 9. So I hung out with my cousin, male, a lot cause he was my brother being an only child and all, and I learned a lot of things from him, and can you guess what one of those things was? That's right, porn. So yeah, I learned about porn, and it was around the time when you start wondering about girls and stuff. Weird shit kids think about, but don't understand. One day 2 of my cousins left with my aunt to go to Costco or something, so I was left alone with my female cousin, 9. Everything's going normal, you know, kid stuff and TV, until she got on the computer and stayed on it for a bit. I was bored, so I walked over to see what she was looking at and behold, porn. I don't remember how the conversation went, but all I remember is both of us being curious about people being naked and having sex looked really taboo to us, so we tried to copy what was going on in the video. So we get naked and start kissing. Felt faking weird, just pecking at each other pretty much, and then she went down and sniffed my crotch, like a really deeper sniff. Next she told me it was my turn to sniff her. She bent over and spread her butt. I look at her thinking about how nasty it looked, but in the end I sniffed. After that I felt so sick and uncomfortable, and I told her I didn't feel like continuing. Later on everything went by normally over the years and we never talked about it again. I could have had sex with my cousin at 9 years old. That was 13 years ago. Making a throwaway, because I have friends that know my account, and while some of them vaguely know this about me, I'd rather not have it attached to my main account. I'm a teenage female, just for clarity's sake. When I was around 8 years old, I was sexually abused by my best friend at the time. I was over at my friend's house, let's call her Amanda, and her female neighbor was hanging out with us. Her neighbor was probably a year or so older than we were. That doesn't matter much. Amanda had recently found a softcore porn magazine, and since had decided to start a stripper club. Not the most imaginative of names, but we were 8. She introduced the idea to me, and I was fairly uncomfortable, but Amanda kept pressuring me to join. I had no idea what that entailed, so Amanda and her neighbor demonstrated for me. This whole time, the door to Amanda's room was closed, and they wouldn't let me leave. Amanda's mom was hanging out in the living room or kitchen, I'm not sure, just somewhere in the fairly small house we were in. Amanda and her neighbor had me sit on the bed and watch as they did things to each other. These things involved kissing, fondling, non-existent breasts, sucking on nipples, kissing private parts, etc. There was a lot more, but I'd rather not go into it, cause it makes me really uncomfortable. After they were done with each other, they turned to me and told me it was time for my initiation. I had to stand naked in Amanda's room while they both did those things to me. Then I had to return the actions to them. I really just wanted to go home, but there was no way I could without revealing Amanda's club to her mother, and I knew Amanda would never forgive me. Eventually we all got dressed and continued playing until I went home the next day. 4 years after that, Amanda continued abusing me. The other day I recalled a few new things she did to me that I had repressed up until now, and since then I've been wanting to type this out somewhere on Reddit as a therapeutic type dealio. I might post this to off my chest, probably with the details of what happened after that night. Again, just as a therapeutic thing. Wouldn't necessarily call it a sleepover, but it was a church lock-in. In 8th grade, my friend's church had this all-night event where they had bouncy castles and games in the gym, and when it got really late, entire church would hide and go seek in the dark. I'm not sure why the adults thought this was a good idea. I ended up meeting this girl, Sarah, and we had this weird, awkward love connection and flirted awkwardly through the night. A few hours later, after we had been playing hide and seek for a while, Sarah and I decided to hide together in the basement. We were awkwardly huddled in this corner hiding when we first held hands. Me being the pubescent teenager I was in heaven. Keep in mind, I hadn't even had my first kiss at this point. We decided to sit on a couch nearby together, and then it happened. In the complete darkness and silence, we kissed. We then started making out and proceeded to do so until my friend's dad found us. All the other kids had finished playing the game and were now looking for Sarah and I. It was extremely awkward after that, getting a ride home from my friend's dad. Here's the kicker. The girl was the head pastor's daughter. After that, we ended up dating for a little while, but it ended up falling apart. Needless to say, my friend has never asked me to attend a church event with him again. I'm late and this will get buried, but I need to talk about this. I slept over at a friend's house 8th grade / freshman year, something like that. Everything is mostly normal throughout the night, though at one point, while I was trying to sleep, he threw a ruler at me, telling me to measure. I refused. I thought it would be embarrassing. Turns out something much worse would come the following morning. In the morning, it's probably 8 or 9 AM, my friend and I start playing video games. Now, in this video game we spotted a sexy pixelated hottie. We inspected her ass, midriff, and breasts very closely. We are both aroused, as we note seeing that the other has already pitched his tent. Now, you must keep in mind, we were lying down in the same bed, his bed. His mother could have walked into the room at any time, telling us breakfast was ready, saying my mom was coming to get me, etc. We each start rubbing one out, still sitting side by side on his fairly small bed. I had grabbed my dirty sock from the previous day and had fashioned a catcher out of it, which I later learned many people did. We are both doing this, looking at his television screen, for quite some time. I hit the point of nut busting, allowed just a bit to come out, and stopped, realizing I don't want to come, while in my friend's bed. He then says, I'm stopping, because I almost came. We don't tell others about this, obviously. Every once in a while one of us will vaguely mention it to the other, and will receive a death stare. We'd like to forget it happened. I don't know what we were thinking. This was in high school. Me and 3 friends, all straight guys, were having a New Year's sleepover in the basement of the oldest friend's house. There was a large futon mattress which I shared with one dude, and the other guy slept on chairs and couches. Well, while my bunkmate was in the bathroom I thought it would be hilarious to get completely naked and hide my underwear under his pillow, and then I'd tell him to look under his pillow after he got comfortable. I was right. It was hilarious. I then proceeded to put clothes back on. Then we played a dare-only version of Truth or Dare, where we just say no balls to get someone to do something. I got no ballsed into licking my bunkmate's nipple. I can't remember if I ever went through with it. He seemed to be ridiculously uncomfortable about it. Well, later down the road a couple years he tells my girlfriend and I that he's gay. The memories of that sleepover got way more awkward after that. But there was a plot twist. At the time that he told us he was gay, he had already been regularly making out with another female in our group of friends. A female who had been a very open lesbian for a while. So, my best friend tells me he's gay, but then starts having sex with another best friend who has been openly a lesbian for years. Crazy. Well then by the end of my senior year the lesbian is emotionally abusing my best friend and basically becomes a hellspawn towards everyone. I'm no longer friends with anyone involved in this story, except I'm still with my girlfriend. The lesbian is now claiming to be a man, but is still dating the same guy. So I guess he is gay? I dunno. At an overnight camp we had someone leave in the middle of the night. He was a larger boy and we were in 7th grade, aged 12 over 13. He had earned the nickname Hurricane. One night we go to a bowling alley, but just the team groups. Hurricane goes to the bathroom and buys a condom from a vending machine. I shared a cabin with Hurricane. By the time we get back to the campsite it's late, so we have to go to bed. I was fairly tired, so I change into my PJs and zonk off. I wake up, and there's a commotion. Hurricane is gone. We don't know why. We ask our counselor what happened. Hurricane jacked off into the condom in the middle of the night and apparently just left it on the floor. Junior counselor found it and called his parents. Took him away while we all slept. TL. Dr. Hurricane came in the middle of the night, but was gone by morning leaving a messy aftermath. Posted before but here goes TLDR. Gave Pikachu Pearline all beads. Well this was back in the time where MTV still played music. I had slept over at a friend's house and woke up to see him still snoozing away. I wanted to play some Vice City, but the faker slept on the remote. So I was stuck with MTV. Well then, as fate would have it, Fergie came on talking about her lumps. Add that with the hormones and me being 13th-year-old boy, I decided this would be the perfect time jacket, and jacket I did. This went on for about half through the song, when I realized something. Where the fuck am I gonna put this load at? Just as thought that, I was ready. I had to think fast, so I ripped my friend's Pikachu pillow out from under his head. He was still asleep, thank God, and let my load flow into a hole this pillow that was conveniently located under his tail, in his buttocks area. After the deed was done, I just threw said pillow aside and acted like nothing happened. To this day, I don't think he knows. The period lump. I spent almost 3 years at a home for kids with behavioral or social issues, and to this day wonder how that place devoid of compassion or competent and merry exposure to kids whose issues were downright dangerous. We had mum beaters, kleptomaniacs, 12-year-old rapists, was meant to fix us. Anyway, there were obviously lots of sexual abuse victims, many of whom coped by shoving their sexuality or twisted perception thereof in everyone's faces. I was 10 or 11, and she was 14, when we all did a fun sleepover in the basement of our group house. The basement was one huge room with cartoon characters painted on the walls, so it was a privilege to get a sleepover approved. So we were like 4 or 5 girls, all getting ready for bed, when B once more decided to sex ed us. B was proud to have had her virginity taken by her stepdad, and being a real woman now, so she thought she should guide us into sexuality, whether we wanted it or not. She'd often disrupt play to teach us how to masturbate, and it was faking annoying, and she should not have been unleashed on a group of young girls with those issues. Like, she would command us to try and pleasure ourselves in public, but her domineering, pushy ways made her an authority figure to us little ones, and we viewed her like an adult with something valid to say. So we are all winding down when she kneels on her mattress and spreads her legs and holds her open hand between them. She tells us to look closely as she pushes out a huge red lump trailing mucousy blood. Then she groans, "Ah, my period lump. See. Look, that's what it'll look like for you soon. Look. My God. B. Fuck off." I'm late to this party, but I hope my story gets heard. Parents went out and all of us stayed for a sleepover at my friend's house. I believe we were around 7 or 8 years old at the time. We all went swimming and all the downstairs bathrooms were taken by kids changing out of their wet trunks. I needed to sheet, and I needed to sheet now, the kind that I had been holding in during truth or dare in the hot tub. The kind of slow cooker sheet that had brewed in 105-degree water for an hour. However, the only bathroom was the one upstairs in the dark and scary parents' bedroom. I was too scared to go up there, and I just let it loose. The sheet coiled up in my swimsuit. Now I don't understand my logic, but I went into the living room, where everyone was hanging out oh so nonchalantly, with a coil of poop in my wet swim trunks. The boy who lived there smelled sheet. He made us leave one by one because everyone denied being the source of the smell. When it was my turn to leave, I thought I could fool everyone. But nope, his controlled experiment worked, and I was found out. Before they could say anything, I heard cars pulling up. Our parents were back. I was meant to sleep over, but asked my parents to take me home. My mom carried me inside, cradling me by the poop coil. She turns to me, "Dad," and says, "Do you smell cheese?" I was 12. Had a buddy that lived maybe 1,000 feet from my home. He was 2 years older than I, so every chance I got to hang out with him and get the attention of an older, popular kid was awesome. He asked me to spend the weekend. We'd camp out and have a blast. There were no curfews when camping outside. So sometime around 10 PM, my buddy asks me how daring I am. Of course, eager to please, I jump at the opportunity. He then explains to me what mooning cars was. You hide back in the cornfield a bit, pants partially undone. When you hear a car coming, you quick run out, drop moon, then run your ass off back in the cornfield. We each get a couple in. Of course you have the few that stop and yell. But who's going to chase a couple kids into a cornfield at night? It was my turn again. I readied myself. Here came a car. I run out, flip my shorts down, waiting for the car to go by. The car comes to a slow stop and I hear, "Just what in the hell do you think you're doing?" I look back over my shoulder, and there in his ranchero is my dad, with my little brother in tow. What does a kid do at this point? Run. What sense would that be? All he said to me was, "Shouldn't you be sleeping by now?" Turns out my brother had forgotten his bag up at the school, and an acquaintance of dad was the janitor that night, so he was running over to this guy's house for it. Impeccable timing. He never told my mother till I was in my 20s and moved away. Around 10 years old I was at a friend's with a few other girls, and we were huddled in her bedroom floor telling stupid 10-year-old stories. One girl told us about how boys have something like a period, except it's white. We were giggling and being 10. Then, my friend's crazy religious mom bursts through the door and demands to know what we are talking about, and threatens to call all of our parents. She had been listening through the door, just sitting in the hallway in the dark spying on our sleepover. Then she calmed down and decided to tell us the facts about the birds and the bees. Extremely traumatizing. Also included in this conversation was a story about how she used to do so many drugs that she once forgot she had a tampon in and put another in, resulting in an uncomfortable trip to the doctor. And she told us about how she had an abortion. But it's cool because she found Jesus and went on to ruin her daughter's sleepovers. A bit longer post, but it started when I was 6. A group of us neighborhood friends would camp out together. Usually a parent or group of parents would be there to supervise. It all started out innocent, playing tag until kids would huddle together for what seemed like hours and never being found. After a few summers there were incidents where a few boys would compare sizes. Maybe a few of the girls starting puberty would compare budding breasts. Then one night during the summer we were all around 11, the adults decided we were old enough to camp on our own. The day goes by as it normally does. Fishing, swimming, guessing who had a crush on who. We were all country so most knew how to build a nice fire, so we built that and roasted wieners, and a friend pulled out a bottle that he'd snuck from his way older brother. So being 11 we all got pretty tipsy pretty quickly, and we all went into the tent to play games. Even at 11 the dark was spooky, and since we had one of those big 10-man tents from the rich kid's dad we all slept in the same tent. So we play truth or dare for a while. It escalates into spin the empty whiskey bottle, but after that the stories start. This great storyteller friend in our group starts telling us that he'd got a blue job at the beginning of the year. He went on to tell details and tell us that someday some sick faking pedophile would post a request on Reddit for naughty children's stories from their childhood. He said if I made up this bullshit story it would be about now that the sick piece of shit would realize, with his pedophile boner in hand, that he is a disgusting worthless sheet. I hope I find you one day to beat the shit out of you. You're a worthless sheet mining for childborn and need to go to prison with a quickness. The horny 13-year-old I ended up doing some heavy petting and oral with the boyfriend of the mother of my best friend back then. How that happened? My best friend and his mother went out to get some groceries, I think, and left me with her boyfriend. We played some video games, I believe it was Tekken, and he asked me why I only played the girls, and that's how things got rolling. I told him that I at least thought I was gay, and he asked me about it and if I wanted to try out the such thing with him and such shenanigans. So yay, we did it in their bed. We did it a few more times after that, even going so far as trying anal, but opportunities were rarely there. He was in his late 30s at the time, I believe. Shortly after I got into a huge fight with my buddy and we kinda stopped hanging out, so the whole such adventure thing just ended. Now, just for the sake of clarification, I was an early bloomer and had a huge crush on this guy. I'm very aware of the fact that what he did was totally illegal, and looking back, he either was really into young twinks or a straight up pedophile. However, he never forced me to do anything. After the first hurdle I was totally on board for more. Ever since that experience, I'm also really into older, more mature guys. Well, Been waiting to tell this story. I was at a sleepover with two of my buddies. Let's call them James, the dude who lived there, and Jeff, the other dude. We were all about 10 or something along those lines. We were brought together by our love of video games. We were pretty much inseparable if we were near each other. I have good memories of my childhood thanks to them. So, we ended up playing the hottest new game at the time, Super Smash Bros. For the N64. I remember James's older brother challenging us to beat him, and he destroyed us all, even with a handicap he imposed where, if we hit him, he would deliberately jump off the map to kill himself. Or maybe we were just bad. No idea. So, we continued playing well into the night. Everyone went to bed beside us. We were quietly playing at 1 AM, but we eventually decided to stop. We talked about what games we wanted back then. Those were some good memories. Then we went to bed. James's parents set us up in the downstairs living room on the couches, though I ended up taking one for the team and sleeping on a pile of blankets on the floor. And here is where the fun begins. I almost fall asleep when James wakes me up. He dares me to do something, claiming I can't do it. He didn't even tell me what at that moment. I, being a stupid kid who wanted to fit in, accepted. He slowly asked me to go outside. The next few minutes were a blur. I remember us going to the garage, going outside, and suddenly, I felt a sharp pain and fell over. The next few minutes were a blur as well, but after that, I clearly understood what happened. My friend dared me to ride a unicycle while juggling tennis balls, and I accidentally went into the road and ended up being hit by an ice cream truck. The driver was a young illegal immigrant who came outside to help me, then yell at me asking what the fuck was I doing riding a unicycle while juggling tennis balls in the middle of the night while in the middle of the road. He used very broken English though, but I understood what he meant. James's parents came outside after they heard me scream, instantly understood what was going on. I ended up getting a concussion and a massive scratch. I used to have a friend down the street when I was around 8ish years old. I was at my friend's house and I remember his mom wanted me to take a bath before we went on a trip. I was going with them for a trip to a place far away for the weekend. That is as much as I remember about it. I thought that was really weird expectation. My friend got out of the bathroom having taken his bath, and then she sent me into the bathroom to take my bath. Well, being that age, thinking I didn't need one, and not accustomed to take bath orders by strangers, I just got my hair wet and put on a towel in the bathroom. I took about 10 to 15 minutes in there because they also expected me to use the same bath water. WTH. After a while, I wet all exposed skin and came out of the bathroom pretending I had taken a bath. About 2 minutes later his mom came out of her room next to the bathroom and said, "You didn't take a bath," with absolute certainty in her voice. I held my ground and insisted that I did, and that was that for that weekend. In years past, that I found a recording of what sounded like sexual activity on a cassette tape of very young voices in his room that he left in a boombox I borrowed to him. I found it weird and mentioned it. His face turned pale and he wanted the tape back. He said it wasn't his and he would get in trouble. This was ages ago. Me and him didn't spend much time together as we grew up. About a year or so later, he burned his house down. Never heard from him again. Family moved away. Can't seem to find him in any way on the internet. I didn't really put it together until 10 years later that there was probably some sexual abuse going on there or something. I don't know. Maybe I have it all wrong, who knows. I wish I wasn't so late to the party, but I can tell you about the most disappointing sleepover I had where I wanted something NSFW to happen, but it didn't. I was 16, and at the time I worked at McDonald's. I worked with this girl who was a couple years older than me. She was pretty hot, and more than a little weird, but still pretty cool. No one knew I considered myself bisexual. Later I realized I was just a full-blown lesbian. There were rumors that at one point she had something going on with a girl that used to work there. She would hit on me sometimes, or more like weirdly putting me on the spot. For instance, I would need to ask her a question and I'd be like, "Hey, Jess," and she'd cut me off and be like, "What? You want to make out?" in sort of a weirdly intense way. I'd be like, no. But little did she know I would love nothing more I had yet to have any experience with girls. Anyway, I slept over at her house one night, and I was thinking this would be my chance to maybe admit I was bisexual and make a move and hopefully get to make out with her. Well, she had to go to the bathroom, and so she went downstairs. I took this time to try and figure out what I wanted to say / do to try and make this happen. She comes back and woo, she smells like crap. Like literal crap. We weren't even that close to each other, but the smell was strong. I was like WTH. Why was the smell lingering so long like that? Did she not wipe thoroughly enough? Needless to say, it killed the mood for me, and I just went to sleep. Never got to make out with her. Not like super shocking compared to some of the comments here, but embarrassing and weird. We'd sort of roleplay, I guess, and pretend that various male anime characters were hanging out with us, and be up to no good under the sheets with the guys. This involved turning around in a circle a couple times, and then popping out from under the sheets after 10 seconds, and being like, oh boy are we exhausted. We, as in, us human girls, did not do that with each other, together, but with our imaginary anime boyfriends, in our own beds. We were like 11 at the time, so old enough to know about Setch, but not old enough that we really understood it, but also old enough to be like whispering penis giggles. Mostly during sleepovers we just looked at Angel Fire websites, took anime personality quizzes, played the game of life, the board game, and watched Adult Swim. And once tried to play a 3-way game of Yu-Gi-Oh! That was difficult. I was friends with the girl next door growing up. Yes, every imaginable scenario eventually played out, but this started it. We were the same age. She was more of a tomboy, into boy things instead of dolls and stuff. We hung out all the time. This is all pre-puberty, so our parents never thought twice about boy plus girl spending so much time together. Quite often she would stay the night and we would sleep in the lounge room watching scary movies and eating junk food, staying up all hours. This night we were in my room wrestling as we often did to see who was stronger / better wrestler. She often won. We were on my bed, and she had me pinned as usual, and I was struggling to break free. She was straddling me, and had my wrist pinned to the bed besides my shoulders, so I was done. In a burst of energy I managed to get my hand free, so I reached over to my other hand to try free that one, but she grabbed it again and repinned me, but in the movement her top 2 buttons on her button-up pajama top came undone, and I happened to catch a glimpse, but kept struggling. She didn't even notice. She was only just starting to go through puberty, so nothing was too advanced, but to me, it was like a switch instantly flicked, and I thought, wait a minute, this is a girl. That's all it took for me to, start going through puberty as well. And I got my first boner. Trouble was she was still straddling me, and I was getting embarrassed, cause I didn't know what was going on. She was still pinning me, so I just froze, thinking it's only a matter of time before she realizes purely from the position we were in. Then she stopped and asked me why my face was all red, but instantly started laughing and saying, oh, I know. I was freaking out. She started bouncing on me, teasing me that I got a little too excited, laughing like it was funny. Nothing more happened until a couple years later. We just transitioned into watching a movie and talking until my parents told us to keep the noise down, and we went to sleep. Must have been 6 or 7. I used to regularly sleep over at this boy's house because my mom was slowly dying and didn't want me to see the worst of it. Anyway, he was like a preemie when he was born, and clearly his mom way over coddled him, so he still wore diapers to sleep in at 6 years old. He was a decent kid in most ways, but looking back, holy shit, this kid spent way too much time talking about how good it felt to piss in his diaper and how great it was, and man, I'm like 99% sure he's got some sort of fetish now, because I'm certain no normal kid does shit like that. Not to the extent he did, where he clearly loved talking about it and tried to get me involved in it. Oh, there was the time I was 8 and the neighbor's kid I had a crush on came over for a while and pissed in one of my mom's bedpans. She was dying, remember, and tried to get me to drink it. Like, full on waving around a bedpan full of his piss, telling me how good it was, and he drank some, and why won't I drink it? He got seriously angry when I declined. Not angry I wouldn't fall for his prank, but like angry I ignored his great suggestion. I'm pretty sure most of the boys I hung out with as a kid have some deep-seated bis and diaper fetishes now. Because that shit wasn't normal. When I was 9, my mom used to work overnight at the airport, so my brother and I would stay at her co-worker's home with their spouses a few nights a week. One house we went to only this one time, because my mom's co-worker had a son my same age. He was having a sleepover with some of his friends, so I tagged along with their games. They decided to play hide and seek in his room with the lights out. Now, being a young boy, I hadn't really experienced someone who was just off and weird, but I knew something was not quite right with this kid, because he was trying to pair people up to hide together. Now, I've always been competitive, so I was in the I'm winning this sheet mode, but he ended up hiding with me after he turned the lights out. After a few minutes I realized the kid who was it wasn't looking. It wasn't more than a few seconds later that I felt the kid put his hands down my pants and start full on fondling my junk. I ripped his hand away from me and he went back for another feel. At this point I run for the light switch and flick it on to find the other boys full on making out and grabbing each other. Of course we argue about the official rules of hide and seek and what the fuck just happened. Since I was the weird one, I opted to just watch TV in the living room. His mom asked why I wasn't playing with the other boys, but I just said I was tired and didn't feel like playing. I told my mom what happened and she spoke with the kid's mom, but she denied that cold happened. Needless to say, we didn't stay there after that night. Edit. I hit submit by mistake lol.